Buick, you could have a Chevy, you could even have a color television in your house, you could have carpeting. You know, it's just that easy, so it seemed. And farming and ranching kind of fell to the side. Now, one of the things that I say is that in so many respects we have to be thankful for the mine because it's saved our lands here. Otherwise, I think a lot of families would have packed up, moved to the cities, and they would have sold their lands. But because the mine, they were able to kind of put their land on hold, maybe run a horse, maybe a cow or two on it. But you know, that was not how they were making a living anymore. They were now part of the American dream. They'd get their lunch bucket, go to work at 8 to 5. At 5 o'clock the whistle blew and they were like Fred Flintstone, yabba dabba doo, whoo, and go home and you know, sit in front of the TV and watch their favorite football team and we were Americans. And it wasn't always like that. You know, like I said, there was this, that we were part of the land. And with that, with the coming of the railroad in the 1880s, northern New Mexico lent itself to large-scale sheep production. So some families, like my father's family, ran many sheep, and they hired many local people to help with the sheep. And that's where my grandfather and his brothers got the idea of homesteading on the west side of the Rio Grande. I believe it was the Homestead Act of 1926, somewhere around there, that opened up those lands for homesteading. They were all part of our ancestral lands, but now they were open that you could own it. So my grandfather took a stab at homesteading. He wasn't very successful at it, and he lost his homestead, but he did manage to buy land out on the west side. And in the 1960s, they switched over from sheep production to cattle. Some of my best memories were, excuse me, some of my best memories growing up were riding with my uncles early in the morning out on their pickup trucks with my cousins, and we'd round up the cattle spread out there, and my uncle would say, "Is that my cow or your uncle's cow?" And little kids would run out there and would come back and report that it was our uncle's cow, and he'd say, "Oh, leave that for him. He'll get his own cows." And anyway, we'd all round up all the cows, would join with sometimes the Cisneros family, and would drive them to Sheep's Crossing. We'd take them down that scary little trail. The cattle would cross. The men were cowboys. They're all cowboyed out in horses, you know, just totally, just like so much influenced by television. You know, they were in their black vests and just like you'd see in television. That's how the men would dress for this, and would cross the cattle, would bring them to the other side. I've eaten so many roasted hot dogs over a sagebrush fire that anytime I smell sagebrush it makes me hungry. We drive them from Sheep's Crossing to the ranger station where the cattle were tagged, and then from there we would drive them up to Columbine Canyon, where my grandfather had grazing permits and his sons had grazing permits on the Carson National Forest, and we'd drive them up to Mesa del Oso, to Gold Hill, and it was the best experience a 10-year-old could ever have. You know, it was something that I will remember forever, when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, those cattle drives. We'd get to shoot the guns, we'd ride horses, we'd be cowboys. We were little young cowboys, better than anything you'd ever see on television. But with that, you know, and as we look back, we look out on the west side, and we see the changes that all that brought. So thousands of sheep, later followed by cattle, had a devastating effect, you know, especially year after year after year. A lot of the grasslands turned into sagebrush lands. I remember riding with my uncle Fred Olin out there, and as we rode along the west side, he was saying, this is This is where the Durans used to have their camp. This is where the Cisneroses used to have their camp. So, you know, the west side was actually quite booming. Here in Questa, the land grant committee has been restarted by the acequias. We need to protect, by protecting the land, we will be protecting our water forever. So that's why we're looking at, that's why we've been supportive of the wilderness area for Columbine. The land grant was also supportive of Jeff Bingaman's attempt at turning the Rio Grande corridor into the Rio Bravo National Conservation Area. While a lot of other land grants were opposed to it, we took a proactive role, and we were supportive of it because we figured that this way we would be able to protect, make sure that our lands would be protected. In that bill, and when that bill is in Congress, it is the one bill in Congress that has land grant language. That bill, the Rio Bravo del Norte National Conservation Area, says that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo will be honored. It says that the land grant trustees will be at the table with any planning. It states that grazing and traditional uses will be adhered to, that people will have access. So that's one of the reasons that we're supporting these wilderness areas around here. If you come to Questa, we're surrounded by some of the most beautiful, pristine land here. To the west of us is the Wild and Scenic River, starting from Colorado down to the community of Erlarde. North of here is the Latier Wilderness Area, where our river starts, the Rio Colorado, the Red River. It starts on Wheeler Peak. The Wheeler Peak is protected as a wilderness area. Just a few miles, 5 miles outside of Questa is Columbine Canyon, where I said that we're supporting turning that canyon into a wilderness area. We're basically surrounded by, and when people talk about that the poor Hispano farmer has been the demise of the mountains of northern New Mexico, you just need to come to Questa. It's been our families who have been protecting these lands, who have created these wilderness areas, who've kept them in their wilderness state for 200 years. You compare that to the settlement along the Columbia River, which is about as old, and you don't find these pristine lands. Our ancestors loved the land and they took care of the land, and that's why we're surrounded by such pristine, beautiful land.